Somewhere in China right now, a group of people are gathered in a small apartment. The curtains are drawn. The door is locked. There's no sign outside, no announcement, no address on any map. And yet, they sing. They pray. They read from a book that their government considers a threat. They are Christians, and what they're doing is illegal. This isn't a story from the distant past. It's happening today in one of the most surveilled nations on Earth, where over 1 billion people live under a government that monitors almost everything: their phones, their movements, their social media, and yes, their faith. And yet, against every odd, Christianity in China is not shrinking, it's exploding. Estimates suggest there are already more Christians in China than members of the Chinese Communist Party. Let that sink in for a moment. What you're about to discover is a story that most people never hear. It's the story of the underground church China has tried to suppress and failed. It's the story of faith under pressure, of communities built in shadows, of a movement that thrives precisely because it cannot be controlled. Whether you're religious or not, what happens inside these hidden gatherings says something profound about human beings and our need to believe in something larger than ourselves. So if you've ever wondered what really goes on behind closed doors in one of the world's most powerful nations, if you've ever asked yourself why people risk everything for a faith they could simply abandon, stay with us, because this story is just beginning. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll never look at religious freedom the same way again. Let's go back in time. Long before smartphones, long before the Communist Party, long before anything you associate with modern China, there was a group of travelers crossing the desert with a message they believed could change the world. It was the 7th century AD, and Christianity was about to encounter one of the oldest and most complex civilizations ever built by human hands. The first Christians to reach China were the Nestorians, followers of an Eastern Christian tradition that had spread along the Silk Road. In 635 AD, a monk named Alopin arrived at the capital of the Tang dynasty, Chang'an, carrying scrolls of scripture and a faith that few Chinese people had ever heard of. Emperor Taizong allowed the Nestorians to build a monastery and preach freely. For a brief moment, it seemed like Christianity in China had found a permanent home. It was in the 16th century that the next great chapter began. European Jesuits, led by figures like Matteo Ricci, arrived in China with an intelligent and strategic approach. Instead of rejecting Chinese culture, they embraced it. Ricci learned Mandarin fluently, studied Confucian philosophy, and dressed like a Chinese scholar. He presented Christianity not as a foreign religion, but as something compatible with China's deepest values, and was eventually received at the imperial court in Beijing, an achievement no Westerner had ever accomplished before. Think about that for a second. An Italian priest at the heart of the Chinese Empire, discussing philosophy with the emperor's advisors. Ricci died in 1610, having converted thousands of Chinese people, including some of the empire's most influential officials. He planted a seed that would survive centuries of political, cultural, and religious upheaval. But it was in the 19th and early 20th centuries that Christianity in China truly began to spread on a popular scale. Protestant missionaries arrived in waves: British, American, Canadian. bringing not just Bibles, but also hospitals, schools, and universities. For many ordinary Chinese people, Christianity wasn't just a faith. It was a gateway to education, healthcare, and a wider world. And then, in 1949, everything changed. If this story is already surprising you, just wait until you see what comes next. Subscribe and hit the bell. This trail is just beginning. October 1st, 1949. Mao Zedong stands at Tiananmen Square and declares the founding of the People's Republic of China. And for the millions of Christians living across the country at that moment, something shifts almost immediately. A quiet but unmistakable chill in the air. Because the new government had a very clear position on religion, it was, at best, tolerated. At worst, it was a threat to be managed, controlled, and, if necessary, eliminated. The Communist Party's relationship with religion was shaped by a simple but powerful idea: that religion was the opium of the masses. From that perspective, Christianity in China wasn't just a foreign import. It was a potential source of loyalty that competed directly with loyalty to the party. So the government moved quickly and decisively to bring every religious institution under state control. By the early 1950s, all foreign Christian missionaries were expelled from China. Chinese Christian leaders who had been trained by Western missionaries suddenly found themselves alone, facing a government that demanded complete submission. Some complied, some resisted, and some quietly began to disappear into the underground. This moment, the forced departure of foreign missionaries, is one of the most consequential and least discussed turning points in the history of Chinese Christianity. To manage the Christians who remained, the government created the Three Self-Patriotic Movement, or TSPM. On the surface, it sounded like a reasonable framework for religious autonomy. In practice, it was a mechanism of control. Churches that joined the TSPM could operate legally, but their sermons were monitored, their memberships were registered, and their theological content was subject to government approval. The answer, for a growing number of believers, was clear. Authentic faith cannot exist inside a system designed to limit it. And in China, those people began to gather in homes, in basements, in fields, in factories, away from the eyes of the state. The Chinese house church movement was not born out of rebellion. It was born out of a hunger for something authentic that the official system simply could not provide. But this was only the first step. The trail goes much deeper. And what comes next will show you just how far people are willing to go for what they believe. Picture a Tuesday evening in a city somewhere in central China. A woman leaves her apartment carrying nothing unusual. Just a bag, just a regular coat. On the 4th floor of a building, she knocks twice. The door opens. Inside, 15 people are seated in a circle on the floor of a living room. There are no pews, no altar, no cross on the wall. But there is a Bible, and there is something in that room that no government policy has ever successfully manufactured. Genuine community built entirely on trust. The Chinese house church movement didn't begin with a manifesto or a revolutionary declaration. It began with people who had experienced real faith and refused to surrender it to bureaucratic management. It began, in many cases, with women, organizing meetings, memorizing scripture, training new believers, and maintaining the invisible networks that kept these communities alive through decades of pressure.
I will not renounce my
One of the
faith,
most
no matter the
remarkable
pressure.
stories involves
How
a
can you say
woman
that when
known as
everything is
Sister
lost?
Zhao.
We are
In the
trapped here.
1970s, during
This
the
faith is our
Cultural
heritage.
Revolution,
We must
she began
protect it
holding
and live
prayer
by its
meetings in her
principles.
home in Henan province.
No matter
At a time when owning a Bible could result in imprisonment, she had memorized entire books of scripture
You see, the
and would
fascinating
recite them
thing about
from
this
memory
passage
to
is
her
how it
small
connects our
congregation.
world to the ones that came before.
When authorities raided her home, they found nothing. The church existed entirely in the minds and hearts of its members, invisible, undetectable, and completely beyond the reach of any surveillance system. What
This is
makes
where
the
we
underground
begin the
church
outrage.
China so
It must be
resilient
covert.
is
The
precisely
risks are
its
high,
structure,
but the people in these
or rather,
villages are-
its lack of structure. House churches have no central headquarters, no single leader who can be arrested to dismantle the whole network, no property that can be seized. They operate as a decentralized network,
As it is written,
extraordinarily
"We must gather
difficult
in
to
his name,
destroy.
even in
You
the
can arrest
shadows,
one cell,
to find
and
the
10
light."
others continue meeting the following Sunday without missing a beat. By the 1980s, the house church movement had already spread far beyond what any government official had anticipated. Tens of millions of Chinese Christians were meeting in unregistered gatherings across the country, particularly strong in rural provinces like Henan, Anhui, and Zhejiang. In some villages, nearly the entire population had converted, with multiple house churches was operating simultaneously in the same small town, each unknown to local authorities. In September 2018,
Yes, truly a
bulldozers
blessing.
arrived at the gates of Zion Church in Beijing, one of the largest unregistered congregations in China, with over 1,500 members. Pastor Jin Mingri had refused to install surveillance cameras, ban minors from services, and submit sermon content for prior approval. On a quiet Sunday morning, the authorities padlocked the doors. Over 1,500 people showed up and found nowhere to go. Jin Mingri was later detained. His congregation scattered, and then, quietly, began meeting again in smaller groups across the city. This story is not exceptional. It is routine. Since 2018, sweeping new religion in China regulations have tightened controls on every aspect of religious practice. All activities must be registered. Minors cannot receive religious education. Pastors must obtain official certification that includes political loyalty training. And yet, the response from most underground congregations was not retreat. It was adaptation. The tools of surveillance deployed by China's government are among the most sophisticated ever created. Facial recognition cameras, monitored phone data, scanned social media. And yet, the underground Church China has responded with creativity that consistently outpaces the technology used against it. Meetings are announced through coded messages. Locations change
He
weekly.
turned the page slowly,
Members communicate
revealing a
through
picture of a
encrypted apps
distant,
or face-to-face
sleepy forest
networks
where the
that leave
trees
no
whispered
digital
secrets to the
trace.
wind.
Consider the story of Pastor Wang Yi of Early Rain Covenant Church in Chengdu. In December
As it says here,
2018,
we are the
over
underground
100
seminary.
members of his
Our mission
congregation
is to
were
study the
arrested
word
in a
diligently,
single night.
regardless of the risk.
Wang Yi was sentenced to 9 years in prison. His response, written before his arrest, was striking. "I am filled with grace and sorrow. Separate me from my wife and children, and I will proclaim Christ among the prisoners." That kind of courage is not the exception among persecuted Christians in China. It is closer to the norm. Persecution does not produce despair in these communities. It produces depth. The underground church does not just survive persecution, In many ways, it is shaped and defined by it.
Look to the light that
Here is a number that should stop you in your tracks.
symbolizes the
In
freedom we
1949, there were approximately 1 million Protestant Christians in China. Today, after decades of restrictions, surveillance, and raids, conservative estimates put that number between 80 and 130 million. China may already have more Christians than any country in Europe. And if current growth rates continue, projections suggest that by 2030, China could become the largest Christian nation on Earth. Not despite the restrictions. In many ways, because of them. How does a movement grow faster under suppression than it did under freedom? When Christianity in China was a comfortable, institutionalized religion supported by foreign funding, it attracted a certain kind of believer. But when the infrastructure was stripped away, when the missionaries left, when the buildings were seized, what remained was something purer and more contagious. People who join an underground church today are doing it because something happened to them that they cannot explain any other way. And that kind of faith spreads person to person with extraordinary speed. Studies consistently find that the Chinese church grows most rapidly in regions where restrictions are tightest. Researchers call this the persecution paradox. The harder a government pushes against a decentralized faith movement, the more it fragments, spreads, and embeds itself into communities in ways that become virtually impossible to reverse. Every arrest creates a story. Every closed church creates 10 house churches. Every imprisoned pastor creates 100 people who want to know what he believed that was worth going to prison for. Consider the story of David Chow, a composite drawn from multiple documented testimonies. David grew up in Shanghai, earned an engineering degree, and by his late 20s had everything society told him he should want. And yet he had never felt more empty. A colleague invited him to a house church meeting, just a small group, sharing a meal and reading from a book. Something in that room answered a question he hadn't known he was asking. Within 3 years, he had helped plant 2 new house churches in his city. Across China's major cities, this pattern repeats itself thousands of times every year. So where does this leave us? The underground church China story is still being written. The government shows no signs of relaxing control. If anything, regulations have grown stricter. And yet, the church continues to grow, adapt, and find new forms with every new wave of pressure. The question is no longer whether Christianity in China will survive. The real question, the one historians and theologians will debate for decades, is what the world will look like when it does. Let's recap what you've just discovered. Christianity in China has crossed 14 centuries of history, survived dynasties, revolutions, and regimes that tried to erase it. From the Nestorians on the Silk Road to Matteo Ricci and the imperial court, from Protestant missionaries to the women who memorized the Bible during the Cultural Revolution. Each generation left something for the next. A faith passed hand to hand, whisper to whisper, room to room, across more than 1,000 years. You saw how the government tried to control that faith, creating official churches, monitoring sermons, restricting who can worship and how. You understood why so many Chinese Christians chose the harder path, not out of rebellion, but out of a simple conviction that authentic faith cannot be outsourced to the state. That there are some things that belong to God before they belong to any government. The underground church China is not a historical curiosity. It is a living, growing, and deeply human phenomenon rewriting the global map of Christianity in real time. The persecution paradox in full effect. The more doors they close, the more 10 others open in apartments, basements, and encrypted message groups. But perhaps the most important thing you take from this video is a question. What would you do for your faith or your deepest values if it cost you something real? Not an easy question, but one worth carrying with you. The trail doesn't end here. If this story moved you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. There's much more history, courage, and faith coming your way. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of Christianity in China. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next episode.